Right. Hello. We're back for our second episode, or second episode of the podcast.
I have to say, just off the bat, I'll admit where I went wrong, and that's that. Obviously, no one will know this, but we recorded a second episode a couple of weeks back, and it was quite a gem. Actually, we thought we had discussed some really interesting things, and
we had discussed some really interesting.
We really did, and we listened back to. I listened back to it a little bit, and I tried to cut it slightly, edited it slightly, and what happened was I actually deleted the whole thing. So we are here re-recording that episode, but what that means for you guys is that it's probably
we got to practice running into this one. So this one's got more structure.
We'd hope.
Yeah, we're learning how to do this right now. Our setup is prime. We've got some proper audio happening, as well as a laptop with things to actually discuss instead of trying to remember, because things get very complicated very quickly.
We get thrown off track
100%.
Very easily. Yeah,
100%. That's a big problem we're having, but we're learning, and you're along for the journey. So episode 2, season 1, episode 2 is we're touching on populism, and in current context, and what it means in modern day society, what we're seeing with the internet. It's probably something that everyone should understand, and just good to know. So what is populism? Shants and I both found. Well, I googled it, and Shanti.
I also googled it.
Thought about it.
I googled it, but I wouldn't say I went for the first definition, although Google pretty much puts up Wikipedia definitions,
exactly.
Which is quite...
So it's a Wikipedia definition. But
I'm a big fan of Wikipedia. Don't listen to your teachers. If they tell you don't use Wikipedia at school, Wikipedia is very trustworthy, actually.
Yeah.
But you should obviously always check things, but it is pretty much like 100% trustworthy, peer-reviewed and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Okay, yeah. So what I found was the quickest Google search was this: populism is defined as a political approach that strives to appeal to ordinary people who feel that their concerns are disregarded by the established elite. All right, it's probably it's kind of populism. It's good. It's an acceptable one, but it's also Anyway, Shant's got another one.
Yeah. So I pretty much got the same thing, and it's basically I actually found a piece on Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which is also a really great go-to in terms of like anything political, anything philosophical. Go look up Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Mine says that it's a political stance that emphasizes the idea of ordinary people, like Luke said, as to juxtapose this group against the elite, or certain group known as an elite group in society. Pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
I think I found out something interesting. I was just saying to Luke before we pressed record, was that maybe something we all know, but something we never say, is that seldom populist leaders will describe their movements as populist. Even though it's been an extremely successful device in politics since throughout human history.
At the end, we'll touch on a little bit about like how common it actually is.
Yeah,
like it's basically just human nature at the end of it.
Yeah,
like dissemination of information. Anyway, and so just coming back is that it's just basically a political approach that strives to approach ordinary people, quote unquote, the majority. Who feel that their concerns are disregarded by the established elite. Now, the elite is we probably don't even mean that in an economic sense. It can be like any minority. It's basically the majority versus the minority. Therefore, it's the popular group versus the non-popular group. And anyone who went to high school knows that if the popular girl says something, everyone agrees with her, or guy, or a bit of both, depending on how your sexual model is fluid. But basically, a popular person says something that becomes the rule of law, and you just agree. Everyone starts to agree, and anyone who doesn't is just ostracized. And that, in a nutshell, is populism. But scaled up, it becomes very dangerous when states are involved, when government, when
it can get very dangerous.
It gets very dangerous very quickly.
And I think the point we probably want to first go to about like the nature of populist movements, and just like populism, is that it's really not grounded in anything particular usually. So, or let me say that in another way, that because that's not entirely true. Rather, you can have a very successful populist movement that has a lot of support and even has the support of the majority of people in a society, but that doesn't mean your movement is grounded in like sound moral values or political values, or it doesn't need to have any strong ideas for it to be successful. So sometimes populist movements
just needs to touch on something where a majority of people feel.
It needs to appeal to that majority's emotions, and appeal to their feelings, and just give them a sense of belonging in terms of
basically
ideology.
Group identification. If you can touch on someone, a universal kind of thing that a large people feel, and you touch on that, and that's basically it. You use that to get them to follow you, and then you run headlong into whatever you feel like running into. So that in very, very simplistic terms is what we're discussing. And then there's a couple of examples of populist movements. Now we've picked the 4 biggest and probably most common, most famous, because we don't have time to talk about things in depth, and we're just going to literally, because everyone should know these things if you went past grade 10 history. So the first one, which was a populist movement, which is the Enlightenment Revolution, or whatever you want to call it, was the French Revolution. Back when we saw basically the French society breaking up, and there was a large upwelling of Enlightenment thought that basically touching on philosophy, breaking down, was questioning what was the imperialist at the time, the feudal system, and moved all the way. Now, we're not discussing whether it's good or bad. We're just saying it was a populist movement.
It was populist because, like you said, there was a level of new enlightenment where a majority of people lived without education, and suddenly there was a sudden access to a bit more information than they had access to before. The common man, the worker, had more access to information, and
when they started to be able to think, a little bit more in depth and discuss ideas. Basically, all populist movements actually are probably related to a technological example. Like, for instance, even to nowadays, we're seeing a lot of populist movements. The internet is making it much easier to have populist movements. I mean, there's even an argument that a meme is populist to a certain extent, because you relate to something and therefore spread it. And so that's populist. But anyway, we're jumping ahead a little bit. Going back to the French Revolution, obviously the book came out, which was very helpful.
The book?
Books were becoming more and more.
They were
the book.
The book. The like public access to books. Was beginning to be a thing. And I think that definitely started spreading a fire. But also, it was just, I think, like with any populist movement, the majority was fed up with certain things in society, and there was leaders who were there to provide them with alternative. And it actually, I mean, the French Revolution is a really interesting piece of history, because it kind of changed the way we think about the feudal system. It
was the first real big break. Well, it was the first one that was like almost done with a manifesto. Like, there was a sense of there was an objective goal after we brought down the elite, established elite, and then there was like serious plans after, and that's why we study it. And then that leads us into the second one. So
just last thing on the French Revolution, definitely an example of a movement grounded in like strong idealism. It had
ideology.
They had strong ideology behind what they were doing, as well as it just being like a popular mass movement. As you'll know, it was ended pretty violently. But like we say, we're not really discussing the French Revolution at this point. The next one we got down is the Russian Revolution, which is maybe not that talked about.
Yeah.
Although most people know it happened,
Yeah.
I think it's not that much discussed. In my opinion, it's because we're in the grasp of neoliberalism at this point in time, and basically like it's a danger for people to know what actually happened. So we don't really talk about the Russian Revolution that much. We're not taught about it that well at school. And if you are taught about it at school, you kind of just taught that the communists were successful in this instance, like one of the only instances.
Yeah.
And
Not for that long either.
yeah, well, I mean, for a long time.
Yeah, but not
With Stalin,
not what they wanted.
But yeah, they were successful for like the first time since Marx, and they in a similar way to the French Revolution,
very similar,
overthrew
What was the Tsar?
the Tsar, which was like a king.
Yes,
you know?
well, which was I mean, Russia was also a feudal state
Feudal state,
at this point, and probably the last big one after the UK. But
Yeah,
at
probably.
at this point,
Probably
colonialism
last-
was collapsing.
Yeah.
No. This is pre-19. This was
Feudalism was collapsing.
in general.
Had been collapsing.
Yeah,
Royal
so last-
families all over Europe were very much under threat.
Yeah.
But like, it was definitely one of the last empires.
It was
feudal
definitely the
empires
last one to
fall.
end so violently. Like it was the last one to end like that.
Yeah,
like, with people
where
being shot.
Yeah, where the royals were literally executed.
Yeah.
But yeah, also just interestingly enough, also grounded in like the spread of information.
Exactly. Ideology,
and strong ideology, where there was like an appeal to the common working person.
the majority of the society or the community, you know.
Yeah.
Where people on average felt like they were being messed up by the Tsar and his government that they had in place. And so there was obviously, in the French Revolution, the same thing happened where there was a spread of information and people learnt. In the Russian Revolution, it was the same thing, following on Marxist views as being a solution to the alternative that spread through small underground communities. Because obviously, towards the end of the Tsar's reign, it became quite regulated. Like you couldn't speak about it because the Tsar saw it as a threat, because he was aware that there was a populist movement. Probably not as aware as he should have been, but yeah, he definitely didn't really know what was going on. But in general, that's how it works. Is it's almost like you don't know it's happening until it happens. I actually described it in an earlier way. Is that it's almost as if there's small little kind of like movements inside of it, and like.
It's like snowball.
It's very much a snowball effect. It's like every now and then it's like just something happens, something happens, and then all of a sudden, you know,
thing's
boom,
massive.
You know,
before you
and
know,
then it's too late. I mean, even
We'll get to it.
So we're going to diversify very quickly if we go there. Anyway, and then another one being Nazi Germany, which is, you can't have a philosophical podcast without going into Nazi Germany. It's so standard, but it's just such a stark expression of a populist movement, and it's something that everyone knows about, and so it's a really good case study for it, if you want to go there.
Yeah, I think for me the important thing about the Nazi populist movement was
it wasn't necessarily an elite group either,
it wasn't necessarily an elite group. That's true. Exactly. It was
it's probably closer to what we're seeing now in populist movements than it was back then.
I mean, scarily enough. But again, we will get to that as well. But I think the important thing was that it was like it was a really strong nationalist movement. So it was all about pride and country. And those were kind of the good grounding principles that it was on. And that's how it was easily sold. Yeah. And then obviously we all know the story and how it used discrimination, racism,
as a gripe to pick on.
Exactly.
You know?
Something like, where that thing where you like, if we have a common enemy,
like enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yeah,
exactly. 100%. You'll unite against a common enemy, and basically it made use of that device and just giving people a common enemy,
which is exactly,
and also just elevating them.
Exactly.
So like take a group of people, the majority of people in Germany in terms of race, and elevate them.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And
Or bind them by a common thread. That's
Exactly.
it. It's not even necessarily elevation, though there was definitely strains of that by saying, oh, we're morally correct to do this. But in general, it's probably more just a tying in for everyone to feel like, you know, quote unquote, blood brothers, that we're all in this together, and therefore it becomes very zealous. Like, we do it, and then like it's fever pitch, and then it becomes very intense very quickly, and that's how it becomes a revolution. But it all starts very as a populist thing where people feel together and think together, and then it becomes very much a crowd, you know, and after you hit a certain point it becomes very revolutionary.
I think I'd give the German people of the time the benefit of the doubt and say that it was definitely that was more a uniting factor, coupled with fear and intimidation. That was definitely the strong tactics used by the Nazis. But I'd say, if I was going to give the benefit of the doubt to just your normal person who maybe either got caught up or just was intimidated into being involved, was that it was like you were given a common enemy, and maybe like the white supremacism of it was much more at the core of it, as opposed to like how they sold it to like the common man.
Yeah, it's
the common person
it's
on
very
the ground.
much like a thing of I don't want to mix my words up. It's a very like thing. It's like, if you're a part of a populist movement, it's very difficult to know that you are, because you feel for it. So that's how it, I mean, even in touching on the next one with Trump, you know, but even in the last one we touched on, Barack Obama was populist. There's a ton of populist movements, and it's probably just what we're trying to probably bring across more than anything is that a populist movement is just when a bunch of people get together, feel the same, and then run off one direction. And it's led by a strong figurehead, or as was in the French Revolution, Russian Revolution, an ideology. More and more nowadays we're seeing an ideology be embodied by a person, because with the internet it allows us to give identity to a brand, this brand being Trump. And even, you know, the way people buy Apple products, I would say, is probably populist, where you just feel connected, and so you buy. It's like it's a brotherhood, sense of community. And touching on the community is probably why it's just a human reality, which is our next point, where it's neither a good nor a bad thing. It's how we interact. But what we want to do with this podcast, and what the objective of philosophy is in general, is that we want to look at human reality, and we want to look at that's just how we do it, and we want to objectively say, okay, cool, that's how we do it. Do we have to do it the same way? Maybe not. But we can recognize things about ourselves. And we're not necessarily trying to change the world. We're just saying, well, that's what it is. Think about it like that, and hopefully it's helpful. But that's just basically just what we're trying to do here. And then so where were we?
I think we could say a few more things about like modern day movements. I think the big one, famous one at the moment is, well, definitely leading up to the 2016 US election was Trump. And you know, I think a lot of us didn't actually believe he ever had a chance.
I was no way.
And I was quite interested. It wasn't that it was out of ignorance. I just didn't, like Luke was saying about populist movements earlier, was that like sometimes you don't realize how big they are until they suddenly
they're very
massive.
Undercover there. It's
and
like you're behind closed doors.
I mean the numbers speak for themselves. Like he did lose. He got slightly fewer votes in terms of like vote for vote. But 50% of America went to the polls and voted Trump in 2016. Like, that is a massive, massive number to vote on. Basically,
on what he wanted,
an ideology that has no ideology. It's very wish-wash. There's no one who voted Trump voted on a principle, unless they were, you know, big money. They voted on like egoistic principles, where it was like, well, this works for me, so I will do this. You know, like that I can understand the logic of. But the majority of people that voted Trump, definitely they didn't have anything to vote on, and that's how we know that the devices used throughout his campaign were super effective and really drew people in with the things we've talked about, like giving people that sense of belonging.
I mean, even
common enemy.
Even this Netflix series that came out, this Great Hack thing. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I haven't actually watched it yet.
But yeah, anyway, just if you haven't seen it, see it. It's cool. But also, just in general, just understanding, I mean, Trump will be a huge... The way populist movements are moving forward now are so much more intense and so much quicker than we've ever seen it happen prior.
Yeah.
Because of the internet and the ability to... What it is, in a nutshell, is dissemination of information. Is being able to send out information very quickly to vast amount of people. And this is what we're doing right now, not just to become a populist movement. But the thing is that the internet is measured in populist movements.
Yeah,
that's how we define
success on the internet.
Exactly, it's that all of us agree and we give our vote of confidence, which is a share or a like.
Yeah,
and then we chat about it later. And that's what if Marx had existed right now, he would be a YouTuber, or he would be a podcast host,
or someone would have put him on YouTube. Definitely,
exactly. Well, he's on YouTube right now, but just not. But the point is that is it. Is that we live in an age where populism is how we define success more and more every day.
Yeah.
Because success, well, how it was is that money defines success, but now populism gives you success through money because you have people's attention.
Yeah.
So any kind of brand, any kind of thing is like, it's probably not populist as you would be taught in school, but it's still a movement of people feeling something that are a majority against a minority. You know, and it probably, I mean, in the political context, it's very slim, but in the context of what it actually is, of people feeling things together on a vast scale, it's a big thing.
Can I put it maybe into a sentence with like...
Would that make sense?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, just relating it back to our like definition.
Yeah.
And talking about information being spread over the internet.
Yeah.
Whether that's YouTube, Facebook, whatever you read, like even online newspapers, whatever, is that you providing a majority of people with this information, and maybe the elite in this scenario would be like mainstream or like classical media, so like information you have access to at universities, which is an elite in terms of like
barrier of entry.
The minority of... There's a minority group of people who go to university. There's a minority group of people who have access to like information, like
which is being
top level information. Which is being lowered by the internet. Like
which
the
is
internet provides us the majority with like this, and it's definitely, you used the word disseminated earlier, and it is disseminated information. Like it's all kind of watered down a little bit, and you have to look really hard on the internet to find. It's like you can find anything, but
everything's like lukewarm. And the thing is, that's how it is. It's like lukewarm. It's like a frog in water almost. That I would say extreme populist movements, like it's a frog in like lukewarm water that slowly gets heated, and so all of a sudden you're like in extremist territory, but you didn't realize you were getting there. Which is how, if you watch The Great Hack, that's how they convinced quote unquote people to vote Trump by slowly increase, because this isn't something you don't wake up the next day and you're like, oh my goodness, like I'm suddenly far right. It's all any kind of populist movement.
You get pushed and pushed, whatever that is. If
it's gently,
you've been pushed from within 100%. Or little hints on.
And what we're saying is just be aware of that. Just be like, listen, actively think about what you're thinking about, because every day there's something. Every day there's things coming up that you don't. And just be aware of it. And because the real sad truth is, and this is just reality, is that populist movements will always exist because humans are fundamentally the same as we've always been. Our biology subscribes us to doing this thing over and over again. Is that when we feel something, we'll fight for it. Right? And the numbers make it very difficult for everyone to ever think about what they're thinking about. But you as an individual have the responsibility to try.
Yeah, you have the responsibility, but you also have the capacity.
Exactly. It's not too hard.
There's not. I don't think there's many humans on this earth who don't have the capacity to just take a moment to consider what they're thinking about, whether it's grounded in some values that they think are good, and then take it from there. Like just that simple thing will at least give you a base level of like always considering back, like going back to be like, why do I think what I'm thinking? And then you go forward again and move on. And I'm not saying you'll ever be like the greatest thinker. I think most of us will just go along checking ourselves all the time. But I think a lot of us don't. Like, we'll just go ahead living our lives like thought to thought, and not take it back to like that fundamental level in your own head where you're like, what do I believe? Like, do I think this is right for me? Do I think this is right for the world? Can I act like this? That type of thing. And I think that is our appeal.
We're living in a time. My dad always used to say that, but we're living in a time where things are happening very, very quickly, and it's probably more important than ever to just actively think about things. And populism is basically our first and biggest gripe, quote unquote gripe, is because it basically defines everything what we're wanting this podcast to be. Is that it's basically just questioning, just thinking about things through. And populist movements are just what we're not necessarily against, but just want to be wary of, because it's a very easy thing to be swept up in. And it really is just that. And I think we're explaining this right, but it's more like, I mean, for me, it's a deep, it's almost emotional, I would say, about how much I want this message to just come across in a clear way, which is why it's becoming unclear. But it's that populist movements exist in the internet, and a lot of us are getting swept into it without thinking about it. So if we know what it is and we can watch out for it, then we can just think about it. And that's it. Just think for yourselves, which is what I said at the end of the last one as well. So just we're really circling
kind of to a little bit. So to kind of just like bring everything of what we've said in the last 25 minutes or so together, and just like kind of look back at it, like a couple of questions, like you said, it's not good, it's not bad, what is it? And you alluded to the fact that it's just like part of being human and having human societies, and that populism will always exist within whatever society we live in. And the important thing is to always just think critically and question that type of thing. But just thinking back on those examples we brought up, and then just any other examples that anyone can think of in terms of like populist movements, and what things that have been described as populist over the course of history, and like talk a bit about connotation. So basically, I was saying to Luke before we started, I think the word populist definitely has a negative connotation. I would describe it like as, in my personal view, as like someone who leans left, a little bit of a Marxist. Like I wouldn't go and say the Russian Revolution was a populist movement. If I was like talking to someone about it, I wouldn't be like describe. I wouldn't use that word to describe it, because there was so much. Right, there's a negative connotation, and I think that connotation would take away from like all the other things I'd rather talk about. Whereas as like a critic of like right politics, I'll go, and if I'm talking to someone, I'll be like, Trump's political movement is just like, it's full on populist, like there's nothing more to it, that type of thing. It just like gets people riled up, and I'll use it as a device to like basically criticize. And I think that's how the word is used. So we've talked about it in a very philosophical way, where we've just accepted like there's a lot of things that are populist, even though that's a negative connotation. It doesn't always mean what's actually happening is bad. It just means we're talking about the negativity of that movement.
We're definitely going to probably get into a thing where we're going to discuss good and bad and whether it even exists. Because when talking about philosophical things, it's very difficult to use philosophical ideas in a context of good and bad, because the philosophical ideas are the overarching thing. Good and bad exists underneath them, so it's very difficult to use like populist. Like populist exists whether you think it's good or bad, right? And so how do we use that word in everyday life without being, it's a populist movement, it's Trump, it's not. It's actually just any kind of movement, and it's very much a scientific practice, actually. Just thinking about that.
But like I was saying, not all populist movements are bad. Definitely not all movements have been described as populist by people, obviously we all have varying opinions, are bad. And that's the point, I guess, of what we're trying to say, is that you kind of got to decide for yourself whether a movement is grounded in values you agree with, things that you think are important to us as humans, things that you think are important to society continuing and surviving in a stable way and like move towards equality and that type of thing. Whereas, I think the negativity of the word definitely, it just describes definitely in the bad senses and how populism is definitely used often to it uses bigotry often, and it uses people's insecurities.
It uses usually attack on minority. I mean,
Right.
that's why I said in the beginning when I said that the Wikipedia,
Definitely in a modern day.
the Wikipedia one, right in the beginning when I said the Google search one, I said, elite, like quote unquote, like, because it's not about that. It's basically a majority versus a minority thing.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily about a political stance or a thing. It's just on average that's how it plays out, but it doesn't only come out that way. And I think what Shant is alluding to is that we just in general that's the only kind of populism there isn't. There isn't. There's a ton of populist movements, and we're just saying that these are the most common ones that people know about it. But we would. What's that? Sorry, I'm not sure.
Either.
I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, that was a phone going off, I think.
Sure. Anyway, but basically, where was I? What was I saying?
You were saying what I was alluding to.
Yes. Which was that populist movements exist.
Like,
inside.
maybe that in our modern day, they appeal to
okay.
certain things. Like
Yeah. So I mean, we just, I mean, it's just, everyone just says, that's a populist movement when talking about politics, but it's also in everyday life. And so it's, I really did lose my train of thought. I was very thrown off.
Well, so I think we covered that quite well.
Yeah,
towards the end.
we're actually probably trying to cut down our rambling a bit, and we've actually probably hamstrung ourselves by cutting it too much. So now we don't know where to go when we've covered the list.
Yeah,
because we usually the conversation flows quite nicely.
Yeah, but I think we have. We don't want to.
We've touched on everything.
We don't want to ramble about populism
too much.
much.
Probably more excited for the next ones when we get into things that are fun.
I think it's a good time to do what we have been doing over the last 2 podcasts. The one you didn't hear was like we'd like to just at the end talk about some prospective topics that we might discuss in the next few weeks. And I'm going to jot them down now while we.
This is for us and not for you, but thanks for listening.
Yeah, but just to
so you can know what's
kind of think
up.
about what's coming up, and so I think what was quite cool, we definitely touched on something earlier.
Good and
the discussion between good and bad.
Good and bad.
Discuss a bit of moral philosophy.
Yeah,
that type of thing.
Does it exist?
That'd be interesting. I also thought of there was something we were talking about in this podcast. Now I was just thinking about. Talking about Plato a bit more in terms of when I was mentioning values and like what you value, like what do you think this is a good thing for an idea to be grounded in?
Yes.
And then I just
how
thought
subjective that is as well.
It is subjective,
Super
definitely,
subjective, yeah.
But it made me think of Plato in terms of like living a virtuous life when he talks about moral philosophy. So maybe that could even be in the same podcast, good, bad, morality, something like that.
I mean, Friedrich Nietzsche, good and evil is definitely going to be like the foundation of how we're going to discuss about it. But we could definitely, I mean, most philosophers have griped with good and evil. Does it exist? How do we measure it? Who agrees on what? Which is definitely something we will touch on, as well as I also said something that was a little bit. Also, for me, something I'm fascinating with is the philosophy of language and communication, information, and things like that. So I'm also very excited to think about how we think about things in the modern age using technology we have. That for me is just something I find fascinating, and I would like to try to chat about that. But what are like the more the more conscribed ideas of philosophy that people, there's like a, I mean, you guys are definitely expecting certain content from us, but I'm just trying to think, because how we think about philosophy is very much in the very thinking activity, not instead of the necessarily specific academic topics.
Yeah.
We touch more on just the process of thinking. But there is definitely topics.
Yeah, I think we wanted to also stray a little bit from purely philosophical topics.
Yes, we do.
That was definitely what we talked about first time.
Yeah.
And just talk about more, like a little bit more current affairs, politics as well. And yeah, I think we wanted to talk about the internet, and I think we even wanted to talk about like psychoanalysis and things where
we also touched on ideology, or
definitely ideology is a big one.
What's idealism?
Idealism.
Yes.
That was what we discussed a lot in the first.
Yeah. Oh yes, we did touch on that.
But I think we felt like we needed to definitely come back to it. So maybe in a couple episodes time we'll come back to idealism, and just like really get into it, because I think we could get stuck into that for a full like 30 minutes.
There's a deep rabbit hole. I mean, everything in philosophy like comes like there are a lot of things that you can run with very deeply.
Yeah.
But good versus evil, philosophy of language. There's definitely a lot of historical things. But also, like, I'm probably also very excited to talk about the future. Like that's also something me and we chat about quite a bit. Is like, where do we think things are going?
Yeah,
that's something exciting as well.
In fact, I think we should go with that next.
Really?
I think we should do next one should be
so soon. You think they're ready for it?
Yeah. I think we should definitely talk about the future next.
Okay.
Just like the internet, where it's taking us.
Yeah.
Climate change.
That could be cool.
That type of thing. Just like what do we think the next 50 to 100 years hold for,
or even shorter term,
20 years.
I mean, listen, in the moment of AI, like how do we respond to AI?
100%.
So when there's two planets that are colonized, if Elon Musk gets,
future's definitely
next. That's the future. We were too excited about the future to not do it. And then we can decide what's good and evil after we discuss whether the future exists for us.
Yeah, exactly. We have to have a future to care about,
whether it's even worth knowing whether good and evil exists.
Exactly. Okay.
All
cool.
Right.
I think we're gonna leave it there.
That's probably it. This is our content. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I think the just one thing we want is basically this one was recorded on some like kick-ass
actual stuff.
Yeah, I'd say kick-ass sound gear.
Yeah,
we've got a little mic in front of us. Yeah, we got a tripod. We're recording on a laptop today.
We have a sound guy.
So big shout out to Ciaran for hooking us up.
And Talis for providing us premises.
Yeah, my sister's little room is our studio. And her boyfriend Ciaran is actually a producer. If you want to check Ciaran out, definitely go do that. Apple Music, Spotify, all the things he's on there. His name is Parable, his producer name. So check that out. Definitely really cool stuff. I recommend. And shout to Ciaran for helping us out again.
Definitely, we needed it. We definitely needed it. But and then again, thanks to you, the listener / viewer, if you're doing this on YouTube. I think we're definitely glad that we're on YouTube. So thanks. We're gonna keep doing this, and we'll slowly get more and more organized. But bear with us.
Yeah.
Otherwise, thanks, and have a lovely day, evening, night, life, year.
Whatever you're up to. Enjoy it.